Hi, everybody. My name is Peg Knight, as I was introduced by Becca, and we are going to learn how to plant some seeds today. And hopefully spring is here today. It's beautiful, but I understand it's disappearing tomorrow. But it'll be back next Friday, which is when I plan to plant my lettuce seeds, but I'll teach you how to do that. So Becca, first slide, please.
Next one.
So plant what you like to eat. And this is what we like to eat. That's my harvest. We have some carrots, we have some acorn squash, we have some beets, I think, out there. And it's a wonderful gift to you put the seeds in the ground, the soil, the sun, and the moisture does a wonderful, wonderful job. You pick out the seeds that you like, and that's what you like to eat, and so that's what you plant. Next. This is our harvest, and it is we're all ready to make salsa. I have a whole bunch more tomatoes back on the other side, and we've got our poblanos, our jalapenos, we've got a couple onions, and so that's always a lot of fun, planting and harvesting. Next. We're going to do a little bit of explanation between the heirloom and the hybrids. Heirlooms are always open pollinated. The seed remains the same for 50 plus years. And there's a nice little caveat that Heinz gardeners planted a Rutgers and an heirloom, and I can't remember the one it was, but a Rutgers tomato, and hybridize that to make it a Rutgers, and the Rutgers now comes as a heirloom. It has remained the same. Once they hybridized and grew it several years in a row, it came back true to form, and now that's the Rutgers is the tomato that they grow for the Heinz ketchup. Next. The indeterminate and determinate. Let me explain a little bit about that. You guys probably mostly already know that information, but let me just review it. The indeterminate is the old-fashioned heirloom, open pollinated, and the hybrid is where they've taken the two good attributes of one tomato and hybridized those two seeds. There's not genetically modified. They have actually pollinated those two in a closed environment, and then you get the true to form, like the Romas. They hybridize those so that you get all of your product at once, and so that the people who are canning and making sauces are able to make those or to purchase those. And we do sell both hybrids and heirlooms here. Next. When to plant. What you want to do is first you want to get some nice soil, and sorry, I'm new to Zoom. Get some nice soil and get it nice and moist, and you're going to plant your seeds in that. You don't want it dripping wet. You just want it where it's going to hold some moisture. You put the lettuce and the spinaches in outside very soon. I'm going to plant my lettuces this coming Friday. I will clear the garden and then make the clean up the soil, get the compost in there and turn it, and then I will plant my lettuce seeds on top because they need light to germinate, and then you'll plant the spinach seeds. Now with spinach and with raw cabbage and not raw cabbage, the raw seed, let me see if I can put this out here for you. You're going to pre-soak them.
Hey, Peg, question for you.
I'm sorry?
I have a question for you. Is it
yes.
the air temperature or the soil temperature?
It is the soil temperature that you're going for. So when it's about 40 degrees outside, the soil is still cold to touch. You want to make sure that you can break apart the soil so that it's friable. This is a little dry, but you'll moisten this up, and it will hold together, but it won't clump. And that's what you're looking for. I'm going to try and get close to the camera so you can see the two different types of seeds. I'm not sure you're able to see these. So this is a coated seed that we have given for some of our lettuces. Can you see that? Whoopsie. No, you can't see that.
Just
See if
raise
I
it
can
up a
help.
little bit. There.
There's a
okay,
coated
good.
seed. This is an uncoated cabbage seed. See the little
Okay.
round ones hanging around, these little guys? Those are
Right.
uncoated. So those are the ones that you're going to want to soak for 24 hours. And that's called pre-germination or scarification. And what it does is it breaks that seed coat so that it's actually able to germinate in the soil. And your plant then will grow. Let me put these back. So the lettuces you start when it's fairly cool outside. The spinach is tolerant of cold temperatures. The cabbages you want to set out as plants maybe in another 2 weeks when your temperatures are closer to 50 degrees for about 3 or 4 days, and that warms up the soil nicely. Your shade tolerant veggies next. Becca. Oh,
I'm
thanks.
working on it.
Oh, one to plant. And there you go. Thank you. Yeah, 40-ish degrees. Beets can go in. Carrots, you want to wait until it's a little bit warmer. Cucumbers and tomatoes, you want to wait until cucumbers probably June, and beans probably June. Tomatoes can go in after Mother's Day or a couple days after that. Thank you, Becca. Next. Be honest about how much sun you get. You want to make sure that you've got enough sun. This picture is at Monticello in Virginia, and it's all arugula. Make sure that you use your spacing instructions on the back of the seed packets. They tell you a lot of information and how far apart you're going to want to thin your plants to. When you plant arugula, or lettuces, sometimes they get a little crowded. So pull those and eat them. Okay.
Peg, I have a couple of questions for
Yep.
you about, I think potatoes. When would you plant those?
Potatoes are a little bit warmer. I think it's on the previous slide. It was, I think it has to be 50 degrees outside. So what I do with those a lot of times is I plant them in bags, and then I'll, if the vinyl bags that they sell, we sell them or did sell them for a while. And you can put them out in the warm sun during the day and then pull them into the garage at night.
Okay, and then can you just quickly review the soaking of the seeds, which ones you want to soak and which ones you don't need to soak?
I sure can. Anything with a hard seed coat. So the lettuces that we gave you are already coated with a seed starter, with a germinator, but cabbage for sure, broccoli, anything with a hard seed coat. Peas, beans will germinate in a heartbeat, so that's not necessary. I certainly germinated all of my, pre-germinated all of my peppers. They have a really tough seed coat, and they really, really need that pre-germination. Spinach is another one that you want to pre-germinate. And kale, but the kale we gave you is pre-germinated. Yes.
How long would you soak them for on average?
24 hours, just in a cup of warm water, not hot, but warm, overnight, and then drain them the next day, and then put them in the soil to whatever the package says. Spinach, I think, is a 1/2 inch, and kale can go up to 1/4 to 1/2 inch. Spinach is a 1/2 inch. So it'll tell you in the back of the seed packet how deep to plant them.
Okay. Any more questions on seed soaking or the planting date?
I'm sorry, what?
I was just asking if anybody had any more questions about seed soaking or
Oh,
planting
yes.
dates.
You know, I have a question about the kit that we got for starting the seeds indoors. Are we going to talk about that later?
We are.
We will, yes. We're
Okay.
doing our just a general veggie talk first, and then we'll go
Okay.
over that. Okay. I'm on
These are the
shade
ones
tolerant.
that will take some shade, which is a very nice thing. So you can plant these along your alongside the shady side of your tomatoes or your bigger bean plants, and they will last a little bit longer into the season. Your kale, any of those you can plant to the shady side. So if you plant your tomatoes on the south side of your house, then you can plant your shady vegetables to the north of those. And it will elongate your season for all of your arugula, your spinach, and your lettuces. Next. Let's talk about this picture a little bit. So I've maximized my space with the planting of the pak choi. Just to my left of the pak choi is the golden oregano, and to the right of that is some parsley. So the pak choi is going to be pulled out of the garden probably around mid-May, no later than the end of May, and that will give the herbs plenty of room to fill out. The beans on either side of that planting bed are going to drape over the sides. And then the cucumbers are going to go up that chain link in back of it so that you're going to have plenty of room for all of your vegetables. So planning ahead is really kind of a good way to do that. Make sure you're planting things in the right spots. Next. The same on this side. We have Swiss chard behind the tomatoes that are hanging over the edge of the side. Makes them easy to pick and gives you plenty of room for your Swiss chard and your pepper. Next. So in the Solanaceae family, you can't use any shade. You really need to have your peppers, tomatoes, and eggplants where they're going to get as much sun as you can possibly give them. They are very heavy feeders. And so you're going to need to give them some side dressing of compost or some organic fertilizer throughout the season. We sell Espoma. It's a very nice product. Tomato tone has 8% more calcium for the tomatoes. The regular veggie tone has the nutrients that you need for all of your vegetables. So that's handy to have. I like the Marconi style peppers, and last year we had a fabulous pepper called Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt was by far a huge producer, and the peppers were delicious. They were almost as thick as a bell pepper, but they had they grew to be probably about 8 inches long. You could have easily stuffed them because they were at least five inches around, and they were prolific. I had tons and tons of peppers on that last year. The bell peppers are always good, but they're a little slower to grow. So you plant your bell peppers, but then you plant a Marconi style as well, and you get peppers all season. Next. So this is how I pre-germinate my seeds for the peppers. Now I pre-germinated my pepper seeds in February. I have some here. This is the shishito peppers. I put them in to pre-germinate on February 10th. And on the 16th, I planted these in soil. They have all done very well. Pretty soon they're going to be transplanted because they have their first set of true leaves coming up through the cotyledons. The cotyledons are what's tucked inside the seed, and it gives the seed its sugars and its nutrients as they grow. You can see by the picture of the state of those pre-germinated seeds. I left those on the counter for about 3 days in moist paper towel right above a heat vent. So it stayed very warm, and it was moist the whole time, and they actually started to germinate in the paper towel. Next.
Can I ask a quick question about fertilizing your vegetables?
Sure.
How often do you fertilize them? Does it depend on the variety of vegetable that you're growing?
With the espoma or well, compost I side dress. And so I will side dress that as soon as I put the plant in. I also put some compost at the bottom of the hole and dig it in to blend the compost with the soil so you don't shock anything. You drop your vegetable in and you backfill it. And then as the season goes, about every 20 to 30 days, I will side dress the vegetable, water it in well, and then I'll put my mulch back on top. I typically will pull my mulch aside to make sure that the organic fertilizer is on the soil, not on the mulch.
Thank you.
Welcome. So I use a few tools to get my vegetables going in my basement. I use the basement as a growth regulator because it's cool down there. It's about 55 degrees. I have a good soil mix or soil-less mix to put my seeds in. I get it moist. I'll put my seeds in and then I'll put it on and I'll mist. The soil will be moist. Once the seeds are in, I will mist with water because you don't want to dislodge your seeds. I have a fan and a small watering can for once you start to see some plants coming up. The fan helps with dampening off and keeps the air circulating so that you don't get any bug infestations or, nothing's going to land on it. Typically at this season, I'll get a few whiteflies on my houseplants. So I try to keep the air circulation going with just a small dollar store fan, or 5 Below, I guess, would do that. The other thing that I use is a heat mat, and I get this from Gardener Supply, or there's a whole bunch of these out there. They're about $20, but it raises the temperature about 10 degrees above your temperature of your air, the ambient temperature. So the root zone of your plant stays nice and warm. You've pre-germinated your seed. I use these little guys to keep my moisture in until I actually start to see some germination. But you've got these really sharp, fancy ones that Becca gave you, or the Growing Place gave you, and they have a nice lid on them, so that will retain the moisture to your seed and to your soil. And can I see the slide again, Becca? Thanks. Yeah, so these are the tools that you use. The container always has to have holes in the bottom. Make sure that you have drainage. You don't want the seeds or the soil sitting in water. And then sometimes you can plant right outside. I take my cucumbers and I plant my seeds outside, but I watch it. I plant my beans outside. I'll plant my spinach outside once it's pre-germinated in the water. And then look at your seed packet, because your seed packet is going to tell you everything that you're going to need to know as far as how long it's going to take to germinate. Most seeds will germinate in, I don't know, 5 to 7 days. I usually go get tomatoes to pop in about 5 days. The peppers always take a little bit longer. They'll take up to 15, sometimes 20 days. I germinated verbena this year for the very first time, which was really kind of fun, and it took a month. So just be patient, read the back of the packet, and it will tell you what you need. And then once your plants are established and you've transplanted them into a size of a pot like this, make sure you harden them off before you put them in the soil outside. You want to make sure that you put them outside. I put mine outside for an hour or 2 a day and then bring them back in when they're first being hardened off. And then after a week, I'll do that for, a day. And then the next day I'll leave them out for 3 or 4 hours. They get used to the air movement. They get used to the brighter sun. And they get used to just being outside, the varying temperatures. After about a week, I'll put them in the soil.
I have 2 questions for you about
Yes.
soil. So, the best organic soil mix.
Organic
I don't know if
soil
you
mix. We carry a nice soil blend. I don't know that it's organic. We grow things here in an organic manner. Sorry, Becca, go ahead.
ours is all natural materials. It's not certified organic, but there's nothing in there that is not natural inside our
Correct.
potting mix we have. And then I think that's what we're carrying this year is our blend of soil
Right.
mix.
Your garden blend last year was amazing. That was fabulous. I hope we get that again.
And then the other
But this
question
is
I
our
have
potting mix. And it's a nice blend to put in with your vegetables. It's got some vermiculite in it. It's got some cocoa fibers in it. It's just a really nice blend. It won't hold a lot of moisture. It will it'll let it drain nicely. So it's a good mix to start your seeds in.
Okay. And then the other question I have is that when somebody starts getting the seeds get spindly and leggy and drape around, what do you need to do to try to stop that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that well.
Sorry. Her seedlings get spindly and leggy and they drape. Is there anything she can do or he can do to alleviate that problem?
Get the light source closer to them. When I start with the small plants, my light source is about this far from my greens, from the tops of my plants. As they grow, I'll move them down where they have a little higher light source.
Okay. All right. Would you, I'm on the pollinator and butterfly slide.
Oh, good. So make sure that you plant some beautiful flowers in with your vegetables, because that will draw in the bees so that you get extra pollination on all of your vegetables. They all need the bees. They all need the movement of the insects, and to make more flowers. So bring in some pollinators into your garden. I typically will plant some pansies early spring, and then I'll move to marigolds, and then I try to plant something for the butterflies and for the bees. All of these are good choices. Next.
Okay. Somebody had a question. They started peas and they are about 2 inches tall. When can they plant them?
I would say by Friday. Friday is like the optimum day to plant. You'll have some moisture in the soil, and then you'll have, because it's supposed to rain, I do believe Wednesday and Thursday is supposed to rain. So you can get those into the soil, I would think, by Friday. It's supposed to be partly sunny on Friday and in the 50s. So that would be a really, really good day to plant.
Next Friday, correct?
So dill and carrots, anything in the parsley family, are great things to plant for your butterflies. I typically will plant some by my house in a pot, and that one I keep a little cover on, usually some cheesecloth or something to keep it covered, because otherwise the butterflies like to lay their eggs on the dill. So I plant some in the garden so that they have plenty to eat, and then we have ours to eat closer into the house. And then of course you plant Asclepias for the milkweed, for the monarchs. University of California has given us permission to use this flyer. And what I want to just make you guys aware that there are a lot of good bugs out there. The dill will draw the parasitic flies and wasps, and praying mantis will eat all kinds of critters. Lady beetle, or the ladybug, eats aphids. So as you plant these things, be aware that don't just go out and arbitrarily start killing bugs. Know that there are some good guys out there as well. All of those, the lacewing will also eat lots of aphids, and it's a delightful flyer. Just make sure that you know that there's you don't want to spray anything, especially during the day when you have the bees are out. I know the Japanese beetles is just awful for all of us, but you'll survive. Nasturtiums will entice the aphids away from the beans. And there is an entire printout that you can get off of the web, which is through the Farmer's Almanac. And they have all of the things to plant to go with, to draw your bugs away from your plants. Oregano is an insecticide, has insecticidal properties. So plant that in your garden and that will help keep away all the aphids. Next. My favorite, this is the cutworm. He is a pest in the garden. He is not a good guy. I will usually use a physical barrier for him, and I will plant my tomato, and then I will take this little pot that I got my tomato out of. I'll cut up the side, cut the bottom out, and then plant this into the soil right around the tomato, and the cutworm then can't get to your tomato. I hadn't had any problems with them for years. All of a sudden, I lost 3 tomato plants overnight. It's like, ooh, gonna get you. So I just planted in the soil right on the outside of that tomato plant. And the tomato grows just fine and the bugs can't get to them. Cutworm can't get to them. The other thing I like to use is I'll cover cabbages and broccoli with some cheesecloth, a nice big drape of cheesecloth. I'll put it into the soil with a couple of twigs or sticks so that it doesn't blow off, and it will keep away the cabbage moths that plant those awful, or that lay those awful loper eggs. Sorry, I'm very nervous. Sorry.
Get the seeds out of the brain, Peggy.
Okay, next slide. So again, mulch or side dress with compost before you mulch, and then you put your mulch down, and you can use many things. A lot of people use newspaper. I happen to really like straw. The mulch tends to break down a little slower. Straw breaks down very quickly. And it's nicer to walk on. The straw is, it kind of forms a mat. And so when you're walking in the garden after a rain, you're not going to get muck and mud on your shoes as quickly as you will with some of the other stuff. The newspaper breaks down very quickly and gets slippery. But you can use anything, and it just will help keep the moisture in the ground and will help keep the bugs from making nests and so forth in your garden. Next. If you plant squash and melons, make sure you give it some support. I had a pumpkin grow inside of a bush one year, and I just took and put my chair underneath it. You can use the old stocking method where you wrap it up and tie that onto a trellis, and it will grow inside of your knee-high stockings. The other thing is you can use the mesh from an old onion bag and put that on the outside of it, and then usually they kind of will expand as the melon or the squash grows, but they do need some support, otherwise it'll rip the vine before it's mature. Next.
Peggy, we had a question about using landscaping fabric. I know our stance on landscaping fabric is that it creates too much heat, and it actually hurts the soil underneath it. So
Right.
We actually don't recommend using landscape fabric to prevent weeds on anything in your yard.
Yeah, seed fabric or landscape fabric is too thick. It doesn't allow air movement through as well. Veggies need a little bit more air movement and water.
Okay, on to the next slide.
Okay, thank you. So this is an old-fashioned way of planting 3 things together. It's called the Tale of the 3 Sisters. So the corn would grow up, and they would plant the beans around the corn so that it would grow onto the corn stalk. And then the squash they would plant at the base of the corn stalk, and that would keep the moisture in. And because squash they have prickly under the leaves and so forth is kind of a prickly, hairy substance, and that will keep the critters away. A physical barrier is another way you can protect your plants, and it will also give it a little trellis to climb. But so any way you give your trellis and keeping your seeds moist, or that's the way you want to do it. The Three Sisters was always the Indian lore. Next. When you are planting your lettuces and carrots and radishes, beets, make sure you thin them and be ruthless. You have to give the one strongest one the best success to grow. So you pull all the spindly ones away from that, thin it out, and you're going to get really a nice crop. I will typically plant my my beets in any of my root crops in a triangle formation, and that allows for expansion of the one without having to pull out a whole bunch of them. But that works really well. Add compost, vermiculite, and potting soil into your area that you're going to plant your root crops, because you want a nice, soft, friable soil for the roots to go down and not be not hit a rock and go sideways and come out looking funky. Next. And that's kind of the same slide when you are utilizing the shade from the for your lettuces from your larger plants. It keeps your lettuces and so forth going a little bit longer. When you harvest your lettuce, your kale, your spinach, harvest from the outside. Those are the mature leaves first. The new ones are coming up through the center. I don't shear my lettuces. I will pick a third of a head from 3 or 4 different heads, and then that will start to regrow. We have a very nice onion selection. We have candy, and that is that's a day neutral, so we don't have to worry about day length. Next. Okay, so here's the Growing Place original raised bed garden, and it has the lettuces, kohlrabi. It has some nice pollinators in there, the sweet alyssum and the pansies. And it has some bib lettuce to the back, and it's got onions and celery. But what's going to happen is you're going to pick your lettuces. Your lettuces are really close to being able to be pulled out, and it's going to give your kohlrabi, which is in the front, a little bit more room, your celery a little bit more room, and your onions more room and more sun. So again, planting with the next crop in mind is key to getting a lot from your garden. Next. So some of your plants will need to be hidden from the daylight, and leeks and celery are 2 of those. You want to take and mound some straw or mound some mulch around the base as they grow to keep the stalks more tender. Your leeks, you know how when you buy them in the store, you've got this big area of white. Well, that is nothing more than that. What they did was they piled some straw around the base of that, and it let it have a more tender white area. The same with celery. Next.
Peggy, can
Yes.
you talk a little bit about how the lettuces in the garden and how long they'll last, and maybe how to succession plant it?
Sure, the lettuces will usually last until it gets really hot. Again, I plant mine on the east side of my house, so they only get a half a day of sun, and they will last through probably mid to end of June. They will bolt in the heat. We have a couple of varieties that they say are that work against that, which is really kind of nice. They last a little bit longer, but they'll get bitter. So you'll see a big crown come out of the center, and it'll be kind of frizzly, you know, the top will just kind of start fraying apart, and that's what it's considered when it bolts. It's going to try and set seed. So at that time, the rest of your lettuce is pretty much bitter. So toss it, plant some new, and try to plant it on the cooler overnight temperatures. I will replant lettuces in end of August so that I get more lettuce in September and October. Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so figs can't be grown from seed here, but we do sell fig plants, And they are very cool. I planted that. I've had that now for 10 years. And I got 70 figs off of it one year. It was awesome. It's a great accent in your garden. I have mine in a container and I bring it in and out every winter. And I just throw a little snow in and it survives just fine. And I'll get a new crop this year. Oh, this is my favorite part. New vegetables for this season. We have sugar cube cantaloupe, new this year. And some of the pictures, I'm sorry, I did pull them off of the internet through our vendors, but they didn't convey real well. Sugar cube looked really, really good. So I used that one. The next slide. Oh, our spinach. Now that's something that I bet we can plant probably, we're opening on the 27th. You probably can plant that the 1st of April. So come on in and get some of that. That looks really good. We have celery peppermint stick, which is red stalks, red, a kind of a pinkish red. And then we've got cucumber martinis. I'm talking about these because the pictures didn't all convey well. We have, yes.
I have a couple questions for you. Can you talk a little bit more about growing celery? Just kind of some tips to get it to be successful.
We have celery and it's very tasty. I grow it every year now, but you do take a little bit, leave your spacing enough where you can take a little bit of straw or something to hide. You can actually use cardboard, but it melts in the rain, and just keep piling it up as it grows. When you pick your celery, I'll pull the straw off and I'll take the couple of stalks and then I'll put the straw back on. I'll take a couple of stalks from the outside, use it in my salads or whatever I'm cooking, soups, so forth. And actually we had somebody here a couple of years ago that took the celery leaves and mixed it with some sea salt, dried them all up together, and she used that for her margarita edging on her glass, which was really cool. But the celery is very, very easy to grow. Just keep it watered.
For large raised beds, if you're getting in bulk soil, what would you add to it to amend it?
Compost. Compost makes the soil more friable, more rich, and it gives it the nutrients that it really needs. We have compost.
Would you add vermiculite into there?
You can add vermiculite. It's just a rock. It's a small rock. It will help drainage, but again, so will compost, and compost will enrich the soil as well.
Okay. And then there's a question about the cucumber plants. We do sell cucumber seeds and we do sell cucumber plants. So
Right.
both.
I will grow my cucumbers from seed. Typically, I will start them inside because I like to know how many I've had before the squirrels eat them. And but we sell both, so you can start them from seed, and if they don't germinate, we've got the plants for you.
And then how do you keep cucumbers from rotting at the base?
How do I get cucumbers to do what?
To not rot at the base?
Don't overwater them, and don't water right at the base. Water off to the side. It's called dampening off, and the unfortunately, if it gets damaged or if it gets too moist at the soil level, they will rot. That's with any vegetable.
Oh, zooks, not cukes. Do you know anything about zooks?
About
Zucchini?
zooks?
Are you talking about zucchini? iPad 52?
Zucchini, thank you very much. You put the straw, probably would be the best bet to keep the base of the plant more dry. And again, you want to make sure that when you put the plant outside, take a little cheesecloth over it until it produces flowers, or some kind of row cover, keep off the bugs from eating into the stem, laying their eggs, and then the bugs eat from the inside out. So if you cover it with cheesecloth or you cover it with a row cover when you plant it outside until it gets flowers, it will protect it from the bugs.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next slide, Peggy, with the
Okay.
red torch.
Okay, yep, that's a new one this year. It's a grape tomato, kind of exciting. We've been asking for more grape tomatoes the last couple of years, and they finally came up with a good one. So yay, we've got red torch. We also have a new pepper called New Ace. I think that might be next.
Oh, Swiss chard is next.
Oh no, Swiss chard. That's from last year, and it was very tasty. A lot of people really liked that, but because we didn't have a talk last year, we couldn't present it. So this year I presented it.
Can you talk a little bit about cover crops? There was a question about if we sell those seeds, and I don't have any available. This year is going to be an interesting year with supply and demand, so the seed companies are overwhelmed. So if you find cover crop seeds anywhere, get them while you can. Okay, so can you talk a little bit about cover crops, Peggy?
I can. Be careful what you plant. Make sure that you're willing to live with it. And then typically people will grow that over they'll leave one section of their garden clear, and they'll plant a cover crop, and then they'll turn it into the soil the next year or the following spring, and then that will in turn enrich the soil for your new plants that year. You know, it's a little easier to do in ag because I don't know. I mean, if you have a large garden, it's great. You can divide it up that way. Some will be perennial, and you have to be careful about that. I like the annual cover crops that will die at the end, and then when you turn it in the next spring, that's great. But we don't have a long season for cover crops, so you really kind of have to put them in and either leave yourself a space in your garden to do that, or do it in September after you've pulled, you know, if you've got an area where you've had a lot of leafy greens, you can put it in there and let it grow until from September, October, it'll die off. I think alfalfa will die off. There's a few other varieties that I'm not, my knowledge isn't very deep on, but I know that alfalfa works well. Red clover works well, but you have to be careful. The clovers, or some of them are perennial. And both of those have been used by my friends, and they like them a lot. That's what I know.
Okay, thank you. Do you have would you grow pumpkin plants in a container, or do you have any recommendations for growing pumpkin plants?
Pumpkins are a vine crop, and they tend to go where they want to go. I put them in a flower bed because the flowers are beautiful, and I maintain the vines so that they stay in the flower bed. So it'll go for the lawn because they like those big open spaces. But I just watch it on a daily basis and put it back into the flower bed. But they will go where they want to go. They're huge.
Okay. I have the
Oh,
onions.
here's another new onion that we got last year, white grano, and everybody liked it very much. We sold out of that early on last year. That's another one of our newish plants. This was new last year, and this can be grown in a container. We did it last year at Naperville, and unfortunately got too wet, and it cracked during that real bad rainy season that we had in July. But the vine grew very nicely, and it produced some very nice small watermelons. So it was thrilling.
You were very excited about that.
Yeah,
Do
was.
you have any tips about growing cantaloupe and the best variety?
Cantaloupe, again, if you have melons, need something underneath them to keep them from rotting. So straw, some our plastic trays that we've had for years, the ones that have the open bottoms that are they're like a grid. something like that, turn it upside down so that your melons will stay off of the soil. Soil will allow the bugs and so forth to get in there. If you keep it where it's dry, you'll have a better result. There's our new pepper, new ace, yay. And then our shishitos have been flying off the shelves as well. It's not, the name is called Dragon Roll Hot, but it's actually a shishito pepper, and it's the ones that, the new ones that everybody's using as appetizers these days. When we can get back to a restaurant.
Sharon, did you have a question?
Yeah, you know what? I was wondering if you had any tips for preventing powdery mildew on zucchini plants and cucumbers.
That's just, that's the gardener's nightmare. A lot of air circulation, put them where they get a lot of sun so that they're going to dry off well, and keep them as dry as you can. It just happens, you know, the end of August, beginning of September, the heat and the humidity just get to them and they just start to rot.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
It happens in my garden too. Okay, and my resources, there are all the places that I've drawn information from, and they're great resources. The other resource I want to let you know is we have a lovely vegetable guide that we hand out to customers in the spring. Hopefully that will be printed soon. So for opening day, you can get one of those. And then in our plant guide, there are wonderful tips as you go through the pages to help you grow. And this one is for planting dates to the beginning of the vegetable section. And then the other one is a very good explanation on the tomatoes and the different varieties of tomatoes that we have. And it will tell you about the disease resistancy of those. That's on page 159 of the new guide. And it tells you about the short internode hybrid tomatoes that are now being produced. We have a bush steak, I think is called, and it stays small, so you can put it in a container, but you'll get a decent sized tomato, and it will continue to give you tomatoes all season because of the way it's been hybridized. And we have probably about 4 of those this year, which is very exciting. Typically a determinate is going to give you all of your tomatoes at once, and so therefore then you can kind of pull that tomato plant and give your other ones a little bit more room. Your heirlooms will need a little bit more room. They get to be about 3 to 4 feet high and probably 3 to 4 feet wide, so you want to make sure and give yourself enough room around the heirlooms to be able to get good air circulation, so you don't end up with powdery mildew on those as well. Any other questions?
Yeah, so do you have any suggestions about types of fencing or tips to keep animals out of your vegetable garden?
They're hungry too. Plant some more. Plant some for them and some for you. Every year I get the chipmunks coming up to the garden, coming up to my my patio where I have my small cherry tomatoes, so I can just go out and pick them as I'm taking care of the other plants. And now I see them running off with one in its mouth. I get so frustrated. I've tried chicken wire. That does work somewhat. Again, you can take and put one of those trellis cages over your cucumbers, and it should grow into that cage. And then you should be able to pick them and then keep the chipmunks out. Birds like to stick their beaks in ripe tomatoes. Pick your tomatoes a couple of days before they're ripe and put them on your counter. They can ripen inside just as well as they can outside. And yeah, you're just battling nature. They're hungry too.
So for the chicken wire, I know we sometimes recommend to fold it and bury it under the ground as well to prevent them from digging underneath it.
Correct. When I put my my fence in, we put 18 inches of chicken wire underneath the fence. When they were out there with the post hole diggers, I was out there with my shovel digging down so I could get the chicken wire down there, because the voles and the moles and so forth come up underneath, as well as the rabbits. But that did work. I had a lot of success with that.
What are some of your recommendations of veggies that are good for beginners?
We have several varieties of container tomatoes now, as well as we have a couple of very, very nice container cherry tomatoes. I really like Baby Boomer. It has produced very, very well over the years. That's the one that you saw in the container that is tumbling out of the container, and it just produced, it produced beautifully all the way through August. Let's see what else. Beans come in all kinds of sizes. If you get the bush variety, you can plant them to the outside of your container. I have tomatoes or cucumbers coming up the backside, and I have beans coming off of the front. I'll take 2 or 3 pickings off of those, then it starts to lose its productiveness. And so I'll plant new seed. So I get a good crop of my green beans with that.
What are some watering tips you have? So how often should you water if we're not getting rain?
Well, I have a little tool, it's called a finger, and you put it in the soil, and if the soil is dry, you water, and probably about an inch down. If it's dry about an inch down, then I water. I try not to water the plant because you don't want to get water on the leaves, and you don't want to get water right at the soil level. So you put it around the plant, like the drip line, like you would a tree, a drip line. And so put it to where the roots are going to be able to uptake it, but it's not going to get your plant over wet.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about cantaloupe, when to plant it and where to plant it and how much space it needs?
Cantaloupes and watermelons, again, you want to put something under. When you see the fruit starting to form, get something up underneath that fruit to keep it dry. Cantaloupe is going to spread. I would not recommend putting that in a container. The watermelon, they did say it could grow in a container, but I think it would probably grow better if you put it in a small raised bed. You know, maybe about a 4 foot by 4 foot raised bed. And the same for the cantaloupe. I think that would do very, very well there.
Okay, and Janet had a question about planting grape tomatoes, whether a pot or a raised bed, and if it needs a trellis.
Depending on the variety of the plant, you can get, I don't know if we have, I think Totem is the new grape, and that's and that is for a container. So that gets probably about 2 feet tall and about 2 feet wide. So as long as you have a decent sized container, that would work very well. But I think you really still need to stake it.
So is it indeterminate or the determinate varieties that are better for containers?
Determinate. And you can actually put aroma into a big pot, but the more soil it has, the richer flavor you're going to get. So if you don't have any room, then put it in a container. It's going to maintain a smaller size, and you're probably going to decrease production a little bit. But if you can put aroma or a regular size determinate tomato in the ground, it will do better. You'll get more tomatoes and better flavor.
What's a good size for a tomato? A good container size for a tomato? Like we have our 16-inch pots that we kind of use for a lot of them.
Well, if your tomato is going to be 2 feet wide, you need something that's going to support that and support the soil. So I would say at least 5 to 7 gallons. I'm not sure. I mean, if I had a pot here, I could probably tell you, but it has to be at least this big around and that deep. So what, about 12 inches deep and probably about 12 inches around. And that'll give you enough soil for a small determinate variety, better bush, and the totem.
Okay. You mentioned beans and tomatoes are good for beginners. Was there anything else that you would suggest that is an easier or a good grower that has minimal problems?
You can put carrots in front of a tomato. You can put carrots in next to your lettuces. The root vegetables aren't as needy for nitrogen, so the nutrient balance on those two would be a good combination, I guess. So if you have, I typically will put some containers next to my patio door, and I'll put my lettuces and my arugula and my spinach in, because I don't necessarily want to go out in the cold and pick those things. So I'll just open my slider and pick them from there. But you can also put some carrots along the edge, and that will play well with the lettuces and spinach and so forth.
Okay.
And
I had a question about the red torch tomatoes. I'm gonna look up how big they get. So the red torch gets about 2 feet tall. I would assume they need to be staked. What do you think, Peggy?
if you can stake it, you would be better off to stake it. Because if it gets windy or it gets knocked over or something, at least then you still have the stem to be able to grow your tomatoes.
Does anybody have any more questions? Peg, I had a question a little earlier on. I know we wanted to go over the seed starting again, but Anne has, when she transplants from the clamshell to the next size, she sometimes damages the roots. Is there any tips to do that successfully?
Yes, just dry them down for a day. I typically water these every morning, and I did water these. And so if you let them dry out a little bit the day before, you can kind of just gently pull them apart. Now, these are a little wet to do this too, but I've got one separated nicely. Don't overcrowd your container, first of all, when you put your seeds in. But if you let it dry down, you can easily separate the roots. You can kind of sift it through your fingers, basically.
Okay.
Anything else? You want to go over the seed starting?
I had one more question. Actually, I have 2 more questions.
Yes.
The trellising cucumbers versus container planting. Do you have a method that you like better?
I have to put everything in containers now because I don't have enough sun. All the neighbors' beautiful trees have filled in, and my garden is now shaded. So now it's a butterfly garden. And so I keep mine in containers, and then I trellis. I'll put a pretty little flower trellis to the back of that. It works well for me, but you can put them on a fence. You can put them on, and if you're going to put them on a fence, I highly recommend taking some jute twine and just taking that and stapling it to the back of your fence, the wooden fence. And they're just easier to grasp on the jute. If it's a chain link, they're going to slide down. So give it something easy to grasp onto to get started. And the jute twine really works well.
Thanks. I had a question about vegetable seeds expiring. They have an expiration date on them. That's like a sell-by date. The germination rate will just go down the older the seeds are. So, I mean, you can always try with your older seeds to see what happens.
Exactly. You never want to waste anything. So sometimes you'll get like 50%, but you still get 50%.
All right, so we're gonna walk you through the seed starting process for some of these seeds. If you purchased a kit and haven't picked it up yet, that's okay. We still have them, so they will be ready for you to pick up whenever you're ready to pick them up.
So we had We had these prepared for us. Okay, we have these prepared for us. And so you just want to make sure and moisten the soil before you plant into this, into the little individual areas. Some of them are pre-germinated. Again, they're the ones that have the coating on them, and I think it's the Simply Salad Kale that are pre-germinated for you. They've got the coating on them. All they have to do is get wet, and that kind of turns into a jelly.
Can you see it?
It's hard to see.
It's really hard to do
Yeah, there
it.
is.
That's the kale one.
That's the kale, right? And the other things you want to just soak overnight. Lettuces you want to just put on the top of the soil and then moisten it with a mister, because it has it needs light to germinate. Snapdragons do too. Found that out this year. I buried mine. We have some delightful seed packets for you that that Becca picked. And just pay attention to your dates. The cucumbers, you don't want to plant until, I probably would put them in soil in my house, maybe Mother's Day weekend, and then put them out 1st of June. Tomatoes start now. Get them in the soil. You don't have to pre-germinate the tomatoes, but at least get them into moist soil today, tomorrow. Cabbages, the little hard seeds, you need to pre-germinate those. Peppers, I would certainly pre-germinate. Broccoli, pre-germinate. The melons and so forth, I probably wouldn't plant in soil in the house until probably Mother's Day weekend, right along with the cucumbers. That and the melons. Spaghetti squash, you can plant the 1st of June. If you want to put it outside, I would probably put it inside around Mother's Day weekend as well. Mother's Day weekend, you do everything. It's the gardener's weekend. Again, peppers pre-germinate, put them in some warm water. Your spinach, make sure you label the things that you're putting them in. Take a little sticky note or something and put it on the outside of your little cup that you're germinating those in, so that you know what it is before you plant it. And I think that covers everything that you have. Peppers need to be pre-germinated. The kale, I think it's a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch deep. Put it into moist soil and then keep it misted for the next few days to keep the moisture level up. But once you start seeing that sprout, then you want to just take a little watering can and water around it. Don't go on the plant itself, go around the plant. And if you can, use something that you can control, because otherwise it may move the seed as it's trying to start its root and can damage the root. It's the most fragile time. Any other questions?
Do you know when you would start Cosmo seeds?
Cosmo seeds, ooh, I have some of those. I probably won't put those into soil, and also I'll pre-start those in the house. Probably next week. The week after.
Our Renee's garden Cosmo seed said 4 to 6 weeks before the last expected frost.
Okay. That's a better answer.
Excuse me. The other thing, the seed packets that you got on the back is direct sow, or when it has the information with your seed as to when to plant it, as far as before the frost date or after the frost date, or direct sow or not direct sow, on that information.
And like I said, if you have a squirrel problem or whatever, you can direct sow them. Instead of direct sowing them outside, you can start them inside a week or so before that date, and at least then you know how many have germinated and how many you're planting, and you can put something over them to protect them from the squirrels digging them up. They like to do that.
And another question about nasturtiums, when we should start them indoors?
Nasturtiums are critical to pre-germinate. They've got a very, very tough seed coat. And then I would probably start you want to put them out about the 3rd week of May. So you count backwards from that germination time. And I believe nasturtiums, I've grown those for years, but I can't just off the top of my head remember. I think it's about 4 weeks before you want to put them outside.
Yeah, 3 to 4 weeks before the last expected frost date.
So Mother's Day weekend is the last frost date, usually here. We've been surprised before, but that's usual.
You never know. We're having like a false spring right now because it's going to snow on Monday.
Yeah. But it's supposed to be nice Friday. You can get your lettuces in.
We will have broccoli plants. Sharon asked if we'll have broccoli plants. We will. I believe we'll have tall verbena plants as well. And then Janet had another question about morning glories as far as when to start the seeds.
Again, morning glories, they do better if you pre-germinate the seeds, pre-germinate them in a cup of warm water for overnight. And then you can plant them the next day. Morning glories are a little tender when in the early spring. So you want to not put those out until I believe end of May, like the 3rd week of May. I'm remembering. What you got there?
Yeah, so indoors 4 or 5 weeks before the last expected frost.
Okay. Yeah, but I wouldn't put them outside until after the 15th of May.
No, and ours don't even come out of the greenhouse until mid-May as well, usually.
Right. Good point.
Does anybody have any other questions?
You know what? I'm having a hard time seeing which one of these are coated, the seeds that are coated and the ones that are not, because I've never done that before. I've just used just the regular seeds.
So
I've
let
never
me say
coated seeds.
the 2 that are coated are the City Garden lettuce mix
Okay,
and the
see.
kale.
and the kale. Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us, and we will post this on our YouTube channel in case you want to watch it again.
Thanks, everybody.